Okay, it actually doesn't show how many people are alive on the one screen, but it does show it on the Facebook group. So I'm going to wait one more minute and see if anyone else joins, and then we'll get started. Okay, it actually doesn't show. Okay, so my name's Kyle. I'm the owner and operator of Gorman Smith Beverage Equipment, and I basically help people find their biggest problems and deal with them from an equipment perspective. So I have a little presentation that I've kind of worked through with several people and institutions over the years, and I'm going to show you guys on how to figure out what the best way to increase your production and make your little brewery more efficient is. So who I am, I basically help breweries make beer more effectively and more at a better quality. I'm a chemical engineer with a beer problem. I studied biochemical and environmental process engineering at the University of Western Ontario here in Canada. I'm currently doing a Master's of Science in Brewing and Distilling at Heriot-Watt. I'm about 60% of the way done now. And I've also been trained by the Master Brewers Association and BJCP on both beer processes, like the engineering side of things, but also tasting. I have been on the Best of Show panel as a judge for both the Ontario and the Canadian Brewing Awards over the years. So that doesn't just go out to anyone. You really have to know exactly what you're tasting for that level of judging. But I also have some other achievements. For example, when I was still brewing commercially, I got my beer to the #1 spot on a listicle for the Chive. And considering the Chive is based in the United States, I thought that was fun and neat. Not an average sort of thing to get picked up by listicles in a foreign country. I co-invented the world's first wearable beer label with a metal band named Diamonds. What we did is we used a t-shirt printing shop, and we printed onto t-shirts so you could peel off the label and sew the beer label onto on your jean jacket. And then I've also tried using a lot of weird and atypical ingredients over the years. Well, the last one I've done was biodegradable packaging peanuts, but I wouldn't recommend that. They have some sort of chlorine-based additive that causes all sorts of off flavors in beer. But you never know until you try, and it's important to try and experiment and keep things healthy. So this process, I'm going to show you how it works, and this is what Sheena Brady of Tease Tea here in Ottawa said about it. And she basically said that just by simply doing this simple exercise, they're able to figure out a lot of their pain points. They had some ideas, they had some concepts on where they could do better as a company, but they didn't have a roadmap. They just needed to know, okay, well, we know we're doing what we want to do and where we need how to get there probably, but her and her husband, they're both incredibly smart people, but they just basically said, we've been operating for about 3-4 years. We've never even kind of modeled or mapped out our business. So they've got a huge amount of benefit from it, and it was a short amount of time. So the general process is I'm going to tell you a little bit on how I came up with this strategy, and then I'm going to show you how to model your brewery, where to use a gap analysis, which is basically finding out what the problem really is, how to make it people accountable for it, and then how I can also help if you're still scratching your head and you'd still like to see the benefit of this service. So when I was in university, and I did a ridiculous amount of global development work. This is me at a grocery store trying to convince people to buy fair trade goods when I was about 20, 21. I wasn't being paid. I was doing this on a weekend. I was doing my own time. I was basically thought, wait a second, if we can't buy coffee from local Canadian manufacturers, we might as well pay a fair price for the people overseas. And that's basically what the fair trade program is. And Any charity has next to no funding. Basically, if you want to spend $1, then you have to raise two. So you have to go up to strangers and convince them to believe in your cause. And resources are incredibly limited. And for every dollar you do spending on yourself to get more donations, that limits what you can do overseas or to grow the organization. So you have to cut down in any way, shape, and form because it is a charity. It is a lot of volunteer work. There's no massive amounts of financing available for these type of projects. So I had to come up with a lot of these tools in order to figure out how to do big problem solving on a very small level. And the challenges was that at the time, um, this company called Futurepreneur, they partner with a bank here in Canada and they run a growth conference. So basically they get a whole bunch of companies to come and they're awarded loans and then tools to use with those loans. And they reach out to me because I'm not too far from where the conference was. They basically said, um, hey, we have a bunch of food and beverage companies. We're about to give them huge loans. Can you help us make sure that they're using that money responsibly? And that's a big ask. And it's like, yeah, that's the sort of work I do. But that's a because it was big because they weren't the businesses weren't the same. So there was a brewery, a distillery, and a tea company. They were all in very different stages of their growth as a company. And they didn't have the same problems. They didn't have the same products. They didn't have the same customers. And I had an hour to help these three companies with these big problems. And I was slotted right before lunch. So obviously, I had to be more interactive and catch their attention and be better than, the promise of pizza within an hour. So that was basic. I had to figure out a way to solve the problem, not the solution. So, step first is we're going to model the brewery. And the reason why this is important is because it's the same tool that someone like my background would use to design the brewery in the first place. And breaking the whole process down into single little steps is going to make us better understand on how we get to the end result. And the first thing I'm going to hear is, but I'm not an engineer. You've done this a lot longer, and like that's okay. That's what I'm going to walk you through right now. And these are just step-by-step instructions to help to determine where the problems are occurring. And literally, it takes some pens, some paper, some sticky notes. Nothing complicated. You don't need fancy software. You don't need to know CAD. You don't need to be an Excel spreadsheet wizard. It's basic pens and papers, pieces of paper level entry. So the first step is what you do is we're going to learn how to draw toast. And this is a picture of me over the summer. I escaped to campgrounds just to get away from the city for a little bit. And you're going to learn how, like, we're just going to draw toast. And ideally, if you're doing this at your own company, don't really chat, don't really talk. You're going to be able to work through it faster because it is a very simple task at the moment. So let's get everyone to draw some toast. And I mean everyone, absolutely everyone, anyone that is involved in the company, any staff, and it's important to do that. So here's my sample. Your first step is you're going to buy the bread, and then we're going to cut that bread into slices, and then we're going to put that bread into a toaster. It's going to cook for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we're going to put either some butter or jam or something like that on top of it, and then eat the toast. And most people's drawings should look similar to this. And the difference is between this and just the concept of drawing toast is we're breaking it down into steps so everyone understands what our process is for making toast. Okay? Next step. We're going to do the exact same idea again, except this time what we are going to do is we're going to take those steps and you're going to put each step on a sticky note or a recipe card or a little piece of paper. So it's not going to be on one page. It's going to be a bunch of little pages. And here's the new way of coming up with. So it's still basically the same idea. You still have to buy the bread. You still have to cut the bread, and you still have to put it in a toaster. You have to cook it, spread, everything like that. But now it allows me to rearrange steps. So if there was a problem or if there was something wrong or not quite right, or I forgot something, I can add that step back in, or I can move it around. And that's the important difference, is that steps should be considered to be mobile. The other thing is you start to get a little bit more detail. So yeah, I had probably about 6 steps for each, but generally people spend more time on the individual steps as soon as you put it onto a single piece of paper for each step. So on a sticky note. So what's next? This is where you bring together everyone's sticky notes and you put them all on a common wall, a chalkboard, a whiteboard, a big table, and you say you group the notes that everyone has that are similar. So this is the exact same idea. You could see the bread in one area, you could see the cutting it, you could see the slice, you could see toasters, you could see time. So okay, everyone is more or less understands the concept right here, right now, on how you should start to pick out the modeling. One important thing is the fewer people have a step or a part of the process, they're not going to have sticky notes there. So if you don't have a lot of sticky notes for a key process, like for example, if you only have 2 or 3 people draw an actual toaster, your whole company doesn't understand a key part of the process. So if you can say, hey, let's get all the sticky notes here. And if you only have one person putting one sticky note somewhere, then you have to ask why that sticky note isn't there. But this is the exact same steps that we use to build the brewery. So we'd have something called a process flow diagram, which is shows basically the steps of a brewery, but it doesn't go into too much detail. So for example, this is one I did for a brewery, and you have some storage, and it goes into the brew house, and then it goes into the fermenters, and it goes into the bright tanks, and you can see a little bit of everything, but it's not a very detailed view. And then this next stage is what we call piping and instrumentation diagram, where we go into a lot of detail for every single piece. Here's another one of the packaging equipment I did for someone. And okay, yeah, it's only like one little block on the small drawing, but on the big drawing, it shows what electricity is needed, what water is needed, what steam, what like chemicals. So it goes much into detail. And then from that drawing, we translate into the actual equipment, into the big stainless steel. So it's the exact same steps that we use for chemical engineering. It's just a different way of approaching it. It's with sticky notes instead of CAD or expensive drawing software. Now, here's a real world example. I was hired by the Brewing School in Ontario to redo their industry course. And so that's how other industries worked with the craft brewing industry. So that's like suppliers, distributors, and the government basically. And I asked them, okay, now you know how to draw toast. How do you make beer? And you can see this is basically the process, like from start to finish. And just if you just quickly look at it, you could see where there are problems. So this was about 20 brewing students in across the program, and they're about just past halfway done their program. And so they had about one full year left of the term. So they were not they're ready to get into the beer industry relatively soon. And they had excellent understandings of the technical and physical aspects of beer making, which makes sense. They've been in a brewing program. They've been shown how to make beer by a handful of professionals for the last year and a bit. So they know how to make beer. That's not the problem. The problem was they didn't realize that they are going to be joining a business, and that business is expecting them to help grow their profits. So for example, I can remember when I put up my sticky note and I said, okay, you put your beer into the bright beer tank, this is where you owe the government taxes. Somebody basically said, well, that wasn't in the assignment, but at the same time, it is. If you are a professional brewer at a brewery, you have to pay taxes. So I knew that they didn't have a lot of like exposure to the distribution and sales and taxes side of the beer industry, which are still important. So this is where we bring in our gap analysis. And the gap analysis is saying, okay, I am here, I have 20 students know brewing, but they don't know the brewing industry. So I need to teach these students far more about distribution than I do know about lottering. So I don't need to pay attention to lottering. They know that. So you can add that point to wherever you want in your own process to work through things. So and that's going to go and affect everything around that one point. So it can be wherever. So, like I said, it can be wherever, and you just need to set a goal. You need to say, I'm doing this, I want to do this now. And this can be something like the volume of beer that you produce. This can be how many customers you have. This can be the amount of brewing awards you win. And the important thing is just to say, here is a number. This is what I want to do. I need to figure out how to get there. And for example, in your production volume, you say, okay, we're brewing once a week. We want to be brewing twice a week all the time next year, or we want to establish 4 new draft accounts, or we want to win 3 beer awards, or something. It just you need to give a key number, because if you don't have a number for it, then you're not really sure what the goal is. So you need to have some sort of measurable, quantifiable action. And this this goal now is going to affect everything backwards and forwards in your big sticky note model. So you put it down and you say, I want to do this. I need to get to this new number. And for example, with your brewery production volume, it's going to affect your suppliers. Are they able to get you the ingredients that you are using? For example, there was a organic brewery here in Canada. As soon as they went through a growth phase, they had to find new hop suppliers, because their traditional hop suppliers did not have enough certified organic hops for them to use. So, can you access the ingredients that you were accessing? More cellar tanks are going to be needed because you're brewing more often. Beer takes the same amount of time. Okay, can the packaging line, or were they struggling before, or are they going to be okay now or were they kind of twiddling their thumbs before? So it's like, okay, you need more cellar tanks, you might need a bigger packaging line. You're having more packaged beer. Can your sales team sell that beer, or are they going to need help? Are you going to look at expanding your local market, or are you going to start shipping elsewhere? So just by simply saying we're going to make more beer by this much, then you have to look at all the effects that simple gap is going to do. Now, you should already start to have some ideas on what you need to do and how you're going to get there, and what kind of constraints you have, and what is reasonable. So it also gives you a good idea on what should be fixed first. So if you say, I want to make this much beer, and then you realize, wait a second, not everything is changing about my sticky note model, then it's not a very easy solution to implement. But if you come up with something, you're like, hey, I want to increase this much, and it doesn't have too much an effect on the whole process, and that's something we're happy with. Great. That's a quick, easy solution that you can make your company more effective without a whole lot of investment. And the important thing is, so this is why I said bring everyone involved and get everyone here and get everyone all sticky notes on the same wall, is because as soon as everyone knows exactly what everyone should be working towards, like more customers in the tap room or whatever you decide your goals are, it gets everyone marching in the same direction. It gets everyone like dancing to the same beat, so you can all help work that issue. If nobody really knows how they should improve or how they should be moving forward, it's kind of hard to resolve that goal. Now, unfortunately, though, with every company, especially small business, it feels like it's the same people wearing different hats. I've done way more research on Google ads and stuff like that than I could ever have thought I would. But that's part of small business, is you're not able to have a specialist in absolutely every role. So it's really hard to make any progress, though, if you're just constantly juggling issues and you're constantly firefighting and putting out the biggest fire as it comes up. You're managing by the crisis. You're not necessarily growing the business. So you're probably going to have basically one person, or approximately one person, in each one of these roles. So you have someone who is going to basically call down the final shot on the matter, which is the owner normally. You're going to have someone who is either sales or marketing of some form. You're going to have your brewing operations. So in a small craft brewery, this is normally the head brewer or the most senior brewer. And then you're going to have accounting and finance. And basically any step further down the line is going to fall into one of these. So distribution, yeah, that's in your brewing. Your social media, that's going to be in your sales and marketing. So you can probably fit all those responsibilities somewhere into one of these four brackets. And but the important thing is you should be able to put one of those brackets with a specific person in the company. They are responsible. That is their job. That is what they need to do. And unfortunately, if you put two names in a certain one of those boxes, you have basically what is called the tragedy of common tasks. And that's mentally I didn't do this because I thought so and so was doing it. Or I didn't do this because so and so is taking too long on their own work. But as soon as you have one person in each box, it's 100% their job. They can't push it off. They can't pass the buck. And that's a really important jump to make, because delays happen. That is one of those things. But if there's not one person to say, hey, I'm having trouble with addressing this issue, or I'm having trouble reaching this goal, you don't know, because it's spread out among several people. But multiple people, like if your brewery's that small, you're going to have multiple people do multiple things. The owner could also be in charge of sales and marketing, or in charge of sales, or like the accounting side of things. The brewer is probably going to be doing a lot of making the beer, but is also probably running out to do the brewery dinners every once in a while. So it's as long as everyone knows who makes the final call on a certain decision, that's the important part. And if that person has a slow day a week, for example, every Monday, what I normally do is I work on my website. So that's my slowest day every week. Fridays are normally some of my busiest. I just work on my website because that's my goal for the next little while. So I give my slowest day to myself to work on my website and learn more about digital marketing and do all those things. And because it's the slowest day of the week, I'm not busy running around actively generating revenue. I can use that to increase money coming in somewhere else in the company when I normally would be trying to figuring out what I should be doing with my time. So my title was called How to Fix These Problems for Cheap. It still is cheap. And let's just say, okay, you're not quite a brew pub, but let's say you're a small regional brewery and you have about 15 or 20 barrel brew house. And just for the sake of this example, you do $500,000 of sales every year. Well, if you spend your slowest day getting a little bit better and just a little bit better every week, and you get 1% better as a company over 12 months, next year, you now have $5,000 that you just didn't have the year before. So that could be $5,000 from new customers, $5,000 in less beer loss. $5,000's a pretty good start to fix any issue. You could rebuild your complete draft lines. You could buy a couple pallets of kegs. I would take 2 weeks off because I haven't had a lot of time off to myself in a long time. So $5,000 is a great way to fixing the next problem. So you have 1% down, you have your $5,000. You now have that $5,000 to get to the 2% or the 3%. It might not seem like a whole lot, but it's enough that it will scale over time. So just how I can help people. So I do offer a lot of education help. I try to help people solve their problems on their own instead of offering solutions all the time. And we can do this activity and help establish your problems over webcam. I also do overall project planning. So I do that on kind of like a retainer basis where someone says, hey, I don't know how to build a brewery. How do I do that? I also do have a lot of background with equipment. So the brew house and cellars, I do work with several people in North America and in China to help source the brewing equipment itself. I do a lot of replacement and odds and ends parts on my website online. I'm never the cheapest. I don't buy shady products. I spend a lot of time building up those relationships with suppliers. So I try to source the best possible using ASME or CSA standards to the best of my knowledge. I'm not buying cheap stuff from unknown people in East Asia, but it will be rain fair. I really take pride in sending drawings to people and making sure everyone understands what's going on and making sure that we're all on the same page and we have everything on one wall and moving towards the right direction. And I also help with product and process. So I used to brew professionally for 4 years. I've gotten my socks wet more times than I can count. And I can either help look at what you're doing already and see how we can improve those products by either flavor profile or cost, whatever your target goal is, or we can come up with new ideas that will help match your existing brand. So for this whole presentation, I went into the process of how I came up with it. I went through on how we're going to make our basic model with just sticky notes. Then we're going to find that goal and set it. Then we're going to figure out how to directly take that goal and make the right people accountable. And also, if you're running into problems with these, you can totally reach out to me. I'm available by webcam. I'm most of the time. I'm just give me a shout, and we can figure out how to fix those problems in your own little brew pub. And this is the best way to reach me. I have my website is www.gormansmith.com. That is my personal cell phone number, and that is also my email address. So feel free to give me a shout. Let me know how I can help you out, because I normally help people in some very tough positions, and we're able to move forward with. And if you want to read some more on your own, I do have a blog. I just put all sorts of technical knowledge up there. Two other resources I can recommend are Traction by Wickman. He does a lot about the business type mentality of figuring out where your problems are and how to structure your overall structure. And then the Drawing Toast specifically comes from a man named Tom Wujek. He's also an entrepreneur in Toronto, and this is kind of how he approaches bigger problems, and he has the same ethos. So I'm going to see if there's any comments. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. I am at about 15 minutes in order to do that.